Yes, so my name is Dominic and I'm the head of DFID Nepal. But my childhood memories really, well, I grew up in the northeast of England. The northeast has it used to be the industrial heartland where we used to build ships and dig coal, so very, strong working background. And I was very fortunate to have a very loving, stable family who were adventurous and used to take myself and my brother out camping and kayaking and doing all sorts of fun things. My school, I was also fortunate to go to a very good school. It was a state school, but which worked very hard to give us a good education and to teach us good values of honesty, decency, of a strong work ethic. So I have very positive memories of my childhood, and I think what that left me with was, I think, 4 key things that I've taken with me later in life. The first was the desire to travel. I love my home city, but I don't spend very much time there. My family, particularly my parents, but my brother, always encouraged me to travel, so that I've kept that with me, and probably why I ended up in Nepal. Well, from the age of 18, I decided I wanted to work overseas. So all of my formative years were spent working out how I could get a job overseas working in development. As it happened, I did a degree in environmental health and then later in water pollution, and all with the focus on being able to be useful in developing countries. So I spent 4 years working in local government in the UK, in a very deprived part of the UK, in East London. And then as quickly as I could, I managed to get a job overseas. My first job was with VSO, Voluntary Service Overseas. I spent 2 years in Namibia, 2 very happy years in Namibia. I then spent 4 years, another very happy 4 years, working as an expedition leader. I worked with a British organisation called Rally International, and I spent 4 years working in Namibia, did another year in Namibia, and then in Mongolia, and then in Chile, in South America. Well, DFID, it's the Department for International Development. It is a UK ministry, so we have our Secretary of State, Justine Greening. We have a seated cabinet. DFID has a seated cabinet. So it's well-defined as a UK ministry, but obviously we're in the UK under the UK government umbrella. So we work incredibly closely with our colleagues at the Embassy and within the Ministry of Defence. As you know, we have a very strong and vibrant relationship with the Gurkhas, who we're very proud of. So in Nepal, DFID is part of that 3-legged stool, if you like, of the Foreign Office, of the Ministry of Defence and Development. DFID has 27 priority countries for receiving development assistance, and I'm very happy that Nepal is one of those. It is a priority because of the levels of poverty, of the challenge of climate change. It's a post-conflict country, but it also reflects the deep relationship that exists between the 2 countries and the support that Nepal has among the British people. Not only those who know about the Gurkha relationship, not only those who know about who've been here as tourists, but those who understand the complexity of poverty and the importance of the UK government supporting Nepal to reduce poverty. So we're one of the priority countries here in Nepal. We announced our new programme 2 years ago. It's what we call our operational plan. And the UK government committed £331 million in development assistance over a 4-year period. Now this is a very important amount of money. It's nearly $500 million. We're having extreme challenges with our own budget, and that we are facing a lot of cuts to police, to hospital services and education. But this government has made the commitment, despite the difficulties in our own country, that it is still important that we support poor countries, for example like Nepal, because we have a moral obligation and we also have an interest, because Nepal is a very important country for many reasons. So we have a programme. I think it makes us one of, if not the largest bilateral donor in Nepal, but we've split that into 4 different areas, into climate change and disaster resilience, governance and security, what we call service delivery, so health, education, water supply, and the final very important one is wealth creation, jobs, employment, stable economy. So they're the 4 different areas that we work in. But to give you an example of what that means on the ground, for example, in rural infrastructure, which helps on a lot of those issues, it helps access to health clinics and schools, it helps to open up local areas to employment. We have a program called Rural Access, and over the last 10 years it's built nearly 1,000 kilometres of roads in some of the most remote places. Now these are very remote places that most people don't go to. I go to them, I'm proud to say. I go as remote as we can, as remote as we need to go and visit. But for example, those 1,000 kilometres of roads have opened up those remote communities to new economic opportunities, to better access for women to deliver babies in health clinics rather than at home. So there's a lot of benefit. On health and education, especially in health, Nepal has seen some incredible changes. The data we have suggests that maternal mortality over the last 10 years has reduced by 48%, as has under 5 mortality. Now this is a remarkable achievement, particularly as Nepal was going through conflict in those times. But we played a part, along with other donors, but most importantly the government of Nepal has led that effort and we've supported them. And I was in Humla a month ago and I could see the impact that has already had. It's too late. The time for doing development projects has passed because winter has now come. So there is already an impact as a result of the limited budget. We encourage all of the political leaders not to politicise the budget, not to politicise the economy, because the economy is a vital part of the peace process and you cannot separate it. So it's really important that the political leaders get together and provide certainty, not uncertainty. There are other challenges such as the remoteness. As I mentioned, I spent a week in Humla visiting some of our projects. We have a lot of projects in the remote areas. We walked for 4 days and we didn't get very far because it's very difficult to get around. I have an empathy with the government about how the difficulties they have in terms of getting out. We did the same in Jumla. We went to see how difficult it is to deliver health and education. It's very difficult in these remote areas. So, I've worked in some remote places, in the southern part of Chile and in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. But actually, there are some parts of Nepal that are the most remote in the world. There aren't many places where you have to walk 5 days to get to, and there's no road, no other transport. You only can walk. So that presents a real difficulty and logistical difficulty. And the complex nature of poverty is poverty is never a straightforward issue. It always has a deep complexity, and in Nepal it is particularly complex. We know, for example, in Nepal, if you're a woman, you are much more likely to be poor than if you are a man. We know if you live in the far west, you are much more likely to be poor than if you live in Kathmandu or the east. We know certain groups are likely to be poorer than other groups. We know if you're a Dalit woman, you are going to be much poorer than a Brahmin man. And there's a lot of sensitivity around this issue. We have an obligation, we have a legal obligation to focus on the poorest groups. So that's what we do. And the final issue which makes Nepal a difficult place is the risk of natural disaster. We know what happened in the earthquake back in 1934. And we know the potential damage it can create. We see, unfortunately, with a great frequency, the amount of landslides and floods that occur. I've been to see communities in the Terai that have suffered from floods, and the social consequences of these are immense. We may not link it, but after the floods in the Terai about 3 or 4 years ago, there was an increase in rape among women because they couldn't be protected. And they were vulnerable, they were living in shoddy accommodation, very basic accommodation, and there was an increase in rape and insecurity. So, the risk that the natural disasters pose and the threat of climate change is very serious and makes Nepal a very complex and challenging place to work. And it goes back to the importance of political stability, because these challenges can't be dealt with until there is they can't be dealt with in a meaningful way until there is political stability. So the leaders, the political leaders in particular, have an obligation. It's not their choice whether they do it or not. They have an obligation today to deal with these issues with the utmost priority and to move ahead on the process of political consensus and peace building as quickly as possible, because people are suffering as a result.
Some moments last a lifetime. Classic Diamond Jewelers.
The ideal person in my life is my wife, and she inspires me. Those people who strive for peace and who lead for peace. And I spent a lot of time in Southern Africa, and I remember when I was growing up, I always remember about this name Nelson Mandela, and he was released, and it was a very amazing time in terms of world history. And looking back and reading about his life, he had, you wouldn't be surprised if he came out of prison, with a bit of a, bad head, a bit angry, but he didn't. He came out striving for peace. Not only that, he knew the importance of being a political leader and how to be a political leader to bring about peace. And he brought a nation together, a nation which still has challenges, but it's one nation now. So, for me, people who strive for peace and who play their role as leaders, they inspire me. The first was undoubtedly my marriage day, which was very happy. I didn't get married until I was 38, so I was waiting quite a while, which is quite late in Nepali society, I imagine. So I'd waited quite a long time, and it was a wonderful day, very happy day for both of us, and it was great to have friends there. Another very special day was in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is a post-conflict country, and when I arrived, it was the most dangerous place in the world for a woman to have a baby. She was more likely to die in childbirth in Sierra Leone than in any other country. So we worked with the government to develop a program called Free Healthcare. It took about 15 to 16 months to get that program established. It was very high risk. The risk of failure was very high. We put in financial commitment, we put technical experts in to help the government establish this program. And it was launched on the 27th of April in 2010, which happened to be my 40th birthday, which I was very happy about. I'll give my age away now. But it was a very special day. And now, as a result of that program, 2 years later, the child mortality figures have dropped, and so less children have died. There are literally thousands of children alive today as a result of this program. My message is to the young people of Nepal is to make sure your voice is heard, because you are the future. That sounds like a bit of a cliche, but it's the truth. Nepal belongs to the future and that belongs to the young people. But you need to make your voice heard in a peaceful way, in a constructive way, but in a positive way. Get it out there, because it is, going forward, the country needs the young people. And culturally, I know young people are very deferential to their elders and very respectful. And, in some regards, we've lost that in the United Kingdom, and we'd like to gain some of that back. But, there needs to be a balance. Young people need to have their voice heard, and elders need to respect the place that young people have in society. So, just to young people, to make your voice heard and make it heard peacefully.